Good evening. It's a real pleasure to be on Zoom, still on Zoom in this reality, and to be hosted. Deborah, thank you for your introduction. It was beautiful, and for precipitating this event. Thank you also for the Stroum Center for Judaic Studies and the Jackson's International School, and for inviting me to the talk. And thank as well to Sarah Zaidis-Rosen, Kara Schoenmaker, and Emily Thompson for your work behind the scene in making this possible. So good evening and good afternoon to you, esteemed friends, colleagues, and community members. This is Hannah Victoria performs the alphabet song, Hoshana, as she reminds us that the alphabet is delicious honey of reading. With our mouth and breath, we eat, we produce sounds, we intimately pray, we embody meaning, consume and are consumed, inventing and being invented in this act. That textuality inhabits Jewish being and the Jewish being inhabits Jewish textuality is indisputable. The Bible plays a singular and irreplaceable role in the life of individuals and in convening and conditioning a community of readers, Am HaSefer, or the people of the book. The rich tradition of Jewish textuality, its interpretation and commentary have provided a lifetime and a foundation for Jewish diaspora across millennium, and occasioned the intellectual trajectory of discourses and disciplines throughout history. During the time of exile, and the Bible often was articulated as nourishment of God, playing a metaphysical role in feeding body and soul. I want to see here just the way that from biblical to the present, and I'll come back to these slides later. Israeli Zionism built on the fact that the Bible has played such a significant role in Jewish consciousness, making it instrumental in the formation of national identity and a pivotal site of identification and normalization. In the accelerated reality of the nation, biblical foundational narratives were subsumed within the historical master narrative of Zionist ideology, telling a story of the birth of the nation, the trauma and victory, diaspora, pogroms, Holocaust, migrations, war, scarcity, and hope. Together with the Hebrew language, the Israeli Jewish calendar, the immediate geography, and the name system. My name is Ruth, your name, Deborah, Sarah. We have here some representation, together with the Hebrew language, the Israeli Jewish calendar, and all these narratives offered the backbone on which to solidify and naturalize the past and tell an organic story in a new country. We can claim with certain confidence that Israelis are Bible literate, irrespective of the level of education and religious conviction. They share a marked familiarity with biblical narratives. Moreover, Israelis, secular, educated, and less educated, not only read, but have internalized this narrative to such an extent that they think and speak through the Bible. The fact that Hebrew is a native language and that the Bible is written in Hebrew, different as they may be, contributes dramatically to this. A privileged, fancy construct of cultural engagement, this can tell us about the interpretive space of textuality and continually invents and reinvent the Hebrew reader. And I call this space that holds this narrative and imagery, hold the space between reading and eating, breadscape. So how do we read? How must we not read? How do we come to the text? As who? What does it mean to read as an Israeli Jew? What does it mean to read as other, as a woman, as a Karaite, as someone with different sexuality or ethnicity? We read in this manner that makes the Bible relevant, producing strong identification and highlights the allegorical possibilities for contemporary life in Israel. We're instructed to read, and I'm going to the Haggadah because we all read the Haggadah, at least if you are Jewish, that we instruct to read it, the Haggadah, as if we ourselves came out of Egypt, as if we are all Esther and Mordechai in Purim, or as if we all came out of Auschwitz. So I will address few of the responses to these narratives in literary text and artwork by a multi-generational, ethnically and culturally diverse group, both canonic and still awaiting inclusion. I'm building on the staggering volume of scholarship of the subject, seeking to add my own perspective to the volume, to this volume. So in my book, Life in Citation, I focus on 4 biblical narratives, as you see on the slide: Moses and the burning bush and the narrative of the 12 spies, the sacrifice of Isaac, the narrative of Sarah, Hagar, and Ishmael, and the story of Ruth. Today, I will mostly speak on milk and honey. And since I'm using fragments of the narrative, it will be a good idea for you to go and read the whole chapter, so you have much more than what I'm presenting here. So these are just a sample to show you about the art production of responding to these 4 narratives. Here we have the Spies, emblematic stamp that was put together as a national stamp for the High Holiday in 1954. This is Kadishman work in the Museum of Tel Aviv on the sacrifice. And what's special about it that the sheep, the animal, is the one that is magnified. On the floor is the head of the son, Isaac. On the left below, we see a painting of actually my brother, Sefer Nehushtan Menashe, of Hagar and Ishmael, departing to the desert. And lower on the right, we see it's a painting by Adi Ness, part of his stage photography series of biblical narrative. It's called The Gleaners, and it's Ruth and Naomi in contemporary setting. Here we have more of Kadishman work and the assorted works of the sheep. He's devoted his life to it. He started doing it after his son began his compulsory army service during the Lebanon War in 1982. Another work by Adi Ness, part of the narrative, the biblical narrative, is Abraham and Isaac, now homeless people, the wandering Israeli Jew, new depiction. So back to the land of milk and honey as it was introduced in the Bible. I interrogate the utterance of a land of milk and honey within its presentation for Moses through the burning bush in Exodus, and later in the narrative of the 12 spies in Numbers. Here, God constructs the terms of his commitment to lead the Israelite out of Egypt and establish the category of sacredness. It is a singular, unprecedented moment in which the divine reveals herself to the human. But the encounter between God and Moses raises an underlying question: how to introduce God and the promised land in a place of indifference. Moses is not that interested at first. He is unengaged, bashful. He claims that he has speech impairment. So he's not a good leader. So God needs to do something big out of the ordinary in order to move him. And here we see that the invocation is very much presented with the authority of God. But Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, in a land flowing with milk and honey, God creates a spectacle which he communicates through the sublime burning bush and in a language that is also most performative, a mighty goodness that is uttered in 4 words. And here we see the power of the Hebrew language. It will unfold a new logic, episteme, and a new code and poetics of enduring provision of land, milk, and honey. This total satiation comes without a verb. Oozing is an adjective. It competes with the mother's milk and replaces her breast, the limited good of her body, with the infinity of God's breast. And in these words, we see the language hovering between utterance and acts or speech act. They move and mobilize. They move Moses. They are also delicious, especially if you are a kid in preschool singing the song even before you heard the narrative. Later on, when the Israelites are angry and had enough with the man and they whines that they want to go back to Egypt, Moses is sending 12 spies to tour the land of Khnaan before entering it. It is an excursion of 40 days. They will be able to witness the land and, as they ask, bring some of its fruit as a proof. So in Hebrew, to spy, leragel, comes from the same root as regel, foot and leg. So there is a clear sense that this is like almost an ethnographic research in which they are going with their own body, witnessing and experiencing the culture. But let's focus on Moses' instruction. It is specific, see the land. But then he starts, is it good or bad? Tov or Ra? And he continues, is when you talk about the land, is it fat or lean? Are the people there settled in or encampment? Strong or weak? And this is where Moses is very specific. He's providing a real script, a very precise script through which the spies will follow this excursion. I call this instruction the tragedy of binarism, and I will explain it, how it leads to specific answers. 2 spies say that it is a land of milk and honey. Tova haaretz me'od me'od. It is very, very good, a tasty, irresistible provision. They performed it as Moses asked, and they bring the fruit, and as we see in the stamp and all the depiction of this land of milk and honey, they bring the grapes, the vine. The other 10 give a grim description of the land. It is a land that eats, devours its people, a threat of total erasure with no trace. We want to ask, what did the spies see? Should they see more than Moses intended? What Moses intended? What is the truth? What about the ethics of their witnessing? And why the truth they discover is so extreme and presented as to counter dialectic knowledge? So it's not surprising. The people were terrified. Moses was terrified. God was terrified. Everyone was trying to change and kind of regret what the reality, till God came with a solution that they will go, and this is where it comes from, that they will walk in the desert 40 years, and this was the punishment. The 10 spies that spoke the truth or spoke what they saw were stoned. So why binarism is not only bad but tragic in the way that I see it? So binarism is a method of thinking in opposition, duality and dichotomies. The best example is the political system in the US, Republican and Democrat. It is a structure that instructs us how to think. It is very seductive. It creates an illusion that reality is simple and neatly organized. Good versus bad, white and black in race, in gender, men and women. Indeed, these pairs always maintain the further mobilize a certain power hierarchies that is so difficult to undo. This power position comes with very obvious privileges, underscoring the structure of many oppressive and discriminatory systems. So one of the most important shifts in the humanities is the realization of this distorted reality that binary thinking creates, and the paying attention to the way that they created limited and reductive, narrow, static, frozen reality. They can even create violence and become unethical as they eliminate differences, all kinds of differences, as they exclude, erase, and deny anyone or anything who does not fall into the perfect category. And one example is Ashkenazim and Sephardim. For a long time, these were the two paradigms, and I'm Mizrahi, so I was invisible in this structure because there was no place for me. There's no place for hyphenation. There's no place for in-betweens or any other complexities. So not only there are more options than good and bad, fat and lean, as Moses presented, not only they can change and be in a state of process or reversal, they can also be at the same time, good and bad, without ability to distinguish, or neither of both. We might even realize that there is no even language to describe the reality in which these, to describe certain reality, or yet in terms of even that it's an obscure description. And just how to think beyond dichotomy is really challenging, because we want to learn how to quantify good and bad, how to think about its economy, and the degree of each condition, and how to observe it in its own term without always see them as two possibilities. So we can see how complex and how these two predictions of one versus the other in these slides created this kind of dichotomy that still function as in the Israeli reality as two thesis about how to conceptualize reality, and very reductive. You still find in the newspaper many people that will go back to the quote and say, oh, in comments, say, oh, what do you want? This is the land that devours its people, and as a code that is shared and but still used as a reference. So back to this process of how to make milk and honey, even as reduced as we see them, from real to abstraction, and how to, in the end, demand that this abstraction will go back to the real, kind of how this process is working with symbols and metaphors, and with the economy that we have assigned to them and that they have been acquiring in the process of reading. So here we see the etching over the top. This is in the middle of the slide. Below we see the stamp that was done by Hamori, George Hamori, but we see that the top of the stamp is Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. This is a quote from Numbers. Then we have on the right, the three logos of the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Tourism, and how the narrative have become a depiction of tourism, and where it seems so logical to use it as a logo for Israeli Ministry of Tourism, turning the spies from spies, as I say, ethnographers and maybe tour guides. And on the left bottom, we see a sculpture, but this is not an old, this is 2007 in Petah Tikva. So it's a city near Tel Aviv. So we still see the engagement and the level of engagement of artists and of the city in promoting this kind of art and the eternal vine, grape, and wine. Abraham Shlonsky, and I want to give a few examples in art and poetry, how these symbols work and how what space they hold in the culture. So Shlonsky was the father of Hebrew neo-symbolism and the pioneer of the Israeli avant-garde. He locates milk in the mountains of Gilboa, in the lower Galilee, that are like a caravan of nursing camels with humps in the sky, and later in rivers, saying, flow, flow, milk in rivers, flowing over the banks. His poem, Israel or Jezreel, is an invitation to the breast, as if the condition of becoming native, a Sabra or Israeli-born Jew, was contingent upon drinking milk. The speaking I here calling, but there also my udder filled with milk, the human udders, and my flesh, overflowing breast, protruding high from the earth. The grand extravagant udder, this is my line, the grand extravagant udder defines now the parameters of national nourishment. This is another example. It's the cover of a German Zionist journal from 1904. Zion is in the middle on top. Here is on the bottom, we have milk with a cow and honey, and the workers of the Valley of Jezreel, maybe, working with the palm trees on the side. So this became a 6th grade class assignment in December 2007 in a school in Ra'anana, actually, as part of the interactive class project that marks the 60th anniversary of Israel Independence Day. In general, the classroom has been one of the effective forefront of accelerated identity formation, so introducing common standard of interpretation, whereby the classroom itself has been established as a platform for belonging and homogenization. This is where we literally became more and more Sabra, more and more readers, Hebrew readers. Here, the students were asked what the land of milk and honey means to them. This is 2007, and to make art project around it. I was very excited and curious to see what they will create. Unfortunately, the answers sparked limited discussion with little innovation and creativity. They read it very literally without developing further. One kid say, maybe we can make a day of honey, milk and honey, and put it in the calendar, but which we do have in a way in Rosh Hashanah and Shavuot. But there is a clear sense that the numbing effect of this metaphor was very obvious. Dan Pagis bring in his poem, Exercise in Practical Hebrew, very famous poem, very celebrated. And in order to teach the tense language, he's using Eretz Ochelet Yoshvea, a land that devours its people, and the lands flowing with milk and honey as a part of the tense system, kind of a grammar language. So it's kind of a pedagogical drill how to think about Hebrew without really, as if you don't pay attention to meaning, as if meaning is secondary to the syntax and morphology. But more important for me is that this poem is in a collection that called Synonym, Milim Nirdafot, and the seventh poem that he compiles is a comprehensive list of 24 references to the word shame. So this is, Hebrew has 24 references to express shame, reminding his reader of the rich, diverse lexical scale of phenomena of shame, culminating in the last gesture, which is called the reader, shame on you. Pagis draws the contours of the ironic, dull, signifying space of language, how we have become so limited, so we use such limited vocabulary. But what happened when we move from synonymization of language to fragments of citation and to narrative? What happened when we use one narrative instead of another? Like in the example that we don't need to tell the story of Haman, we already know the story of Pharaoh. So we can refer to Haman as another Pharaoh and we are done with history. So how to not fall into the synonymization that he describes. Michal Naaman, a contemporary Israeli artist, used the citation as in her piece art. It's the two citations written in pencil and kind of enough to reveal the scope of her alarming Israeli reality. On the right, crowded, it says, a land eating its people, Eretz Ochelet Yoshvea. It's almost indistinguishable. It's kind of very difficult to see. And on the left, a kid or lamb in its mother milk. It seems innocent, raw, banal, and symmetric. But a land of milk and honey, the counter depiction of a land that devours its people, is not here. What we have here is the dietary prohibition. Do not cook a kid in its mother milk, but from the dietary prohibition, she uses a kid in its mother milk. So it's not a prohibition. This is the reality. We are actually eating milk, a kid in its milk. Naaman's novel temporality highlights the non-fictional meaning of her art, transforming her into a witness of reading, whose quotes serve as visual evidence in her documentation of national culture. In its spatial syntax, on the page, she creates a new historical location of open time that contains the notation of slaughtering. The kid is the sacrifice. But Naaman's feminist statement also addresses the total lack of mercy toward the bereaved mother. Do not cook a kid in his mother milk is to protect the mother, so it's not cooked in the same environment of its offspring. And that's the only reason that the rabbis develop around this prohibition. Thus, the path of destruction of both mother and child is already into this citation. Not the space between them and the notation on top, as if we have a new logic of reading of the daf, the religious daily daf, right? This is a new artistic daf reading page. But like Kadishman and Adines, Naaman grapples with the subject of violence. Here on the wall painting, she continues to interrogate the horror of the kid in its mother milk. It's like Gdi b'chalav imo, but again, very crowded. Mother and son are mixed. Blood replaces milk. Citation carries banality in it, a code that nonetheless normalize violence, how to move out of it. For us, it is a good reminder that citations should not be synonyms. They have specific time and geography, but also different authors at different moments of their life, like Kadishman after his son was enlisted to the army. In 1999 interview, Naaman describes the process of painterly composition as one of cooking, stating that, oh, while I'm the one who knows nothing about cooking, I know how to take a verse from the Bible, which is exactly citation. Naaman cunningly refutes the idea of artistic talent, highlighting that she comes to the canvas wounded and lacking. So this is Tnuva. I'm not going to go into details about the production and what Tnuva has become, the largest food company. Many say that the story or history of Tnuva is the story of Zionism from its early age, like you have on the left side, the early days of Tnuva delivering milk. How Tnuva on the map became Israel. Moshe Dayan, the Minister of Agriculture, but he had many roles in Israeli military and government, drinking milk as the national superfood, ideal ego drink in capitalist society. It provides index of health, normalization, daily wellness, and children of the Sabra elite were also called Yaldei Tnuva, the children of Tnuba. You were like a cream, children of, no, how do you say it in English? The creme de la creme, you know, children of Tnuva as a specific notation. So we have here the Jerusalem Day parade, and we see the dolls, the cow dolls. And here we have Miss Tnuva in 2004, a competition of the design school Shankar to use the cow as canvas and to try to create what is the most Israeli cow of all. And here we see the 4 winning cows, one with the dough, with the olive branch. The below is the cow of the Hamsa against the evil eye, the symbol of the 5 hand, the hand with the 5 finger. On the left below, we have the diversity, the one of kibbutz galuyot, in gathering of the Jews of all over. And you'll see the kibbutznik, religious, Arab, all of them. And the winning cow is one of the sticker. So these 4 winning design tell us about the engagement, how cow replaced, when we talk about milk and replacing other, but within the graduation, within the discourse of a land of milk and honey. In the film Adama Meshugat, Sweet Mud by Dror Shaul in 2006, a kibbutznik Avram, which is the highest leadership position, the secretary in the kibbutz, early in the morning, secretively ran to the kibbutz dairy to suck from the udder of the cow. Abraham is still thirsty for warm, immediate milk with no distance, with neither symbolic nor mythological or abstract. Is he addicted, intoxicated by Shlonsky lures of milk, loaves of milk and its legacy of belonging? We know that he is now clinging and further sanctifying the very body that provided, like the canvas. So in 1977, Judith Butler, moving a little to feminism, developed the concept of doing gender. It's a philosophical thesis that on the constitution of gender. The Butler seek to denaturalize the essentialized category of gender, claiming that gender is an acquired, routinized, and socialized way of living, constructed by repetition of practice in everyday life and in interaction between individuals. So there is nothing innate in us that reveals our gender. And we can see here, like from the second the baby is born, it's a boy, it's a girl, and how we continue this kind of acculturation. So we all know what, and we don't need to talk about these roles, right? The gender is performed by following a cultural script of specific roles, and we all know and share them. We know what it means to be a girl or a woman, what it means to be a boy, and we also know what does it mean when these are transgressed and how identity is being challenged. So following Butler, I ask, is it possible that Israelis are doing Bible? Is it possible to think that doing Bible at the unique intersection of religion and secularism, modernity and nationalism, and from within the Jewish intertextual tradition of reading and writing, we can talk about this kind of practice that is repetitive. It's not about meaning per se, but it's about its promise to include us, to make us part of the citizenry of Zionism, part of the collective in aspirational homogenization that we all share. So it's not about information, it's about the coding and how this coding become what we call doing things. That so with digitized age and social media, global distribution, capitalist economy, and the increasing availability of material, and with the way the collective memory and trauma have been treated, articulated in the culture, we can say that Israel is practicing doing Bible much more linguistically and thematically, and in much more intensified and accelerated way. So inevitably, this led me to study biblical citation, kind of, what does it mean to cite, to continuously be in process of citation, like Naaman and all the artists that we saw. In Hebrew, it's citated, citationality, or as Hannah Kornfeld suggested to me, citationitis, citated, which follow the pattern of diseases and intensified work, is based on the profound identification of the Hebrew reader with its protagonist, along with the naturalization and normalization of the biblical narrative in everyday life. Citationitis, as a life condition, is a multi-layered system of referencing, interpretation, and meaning-making. It opens a dynamic discursive space that assigns its reader a scripted way to live with text. In the same way that gender is scripted and we know what does it mean to be boy or girl, there is a certain way in which to be a reader of the Bible, and Hebrew reader of the Bible, is very clearly scripted. It intends both to point to the condition of existence within this density of the crowded biblical framework, and like in Zizek, capitalism, it also point to it is total, it makes no alternative thinkable. So, and from here I can go to what does it mean to mean to do Bible. And I just brought few examples of Torah. I translated Tanakh into Torah, so it's easier, even though it's an acronym for the whole Bible, Tanakh. The proliferation of biblical, the industry of the Bible when it comes to what it provides, and again, secular, not religious, not in the West Bank, not among Orthodox, is really fascinating. 929 is a website that I encourage you to explore. It's after the 929 chapters of the Bible, and follow the 3 years of reading Parashat HaShavua, the portion of the week. And it's a website that includes everything: commentary, interpretation, films, dictionaries. It's really grand. We have here also Torah B'Salon, Tikkun B'Salon, how to create your living room into a space of study, and how it's kind of become a guest of this kind of this Meir Shalev, Tanakh Achshav, now Tanakh, who actually think that the way the Tanakh impacted Israelis and messed up their consciousness, that the Tanakh should be rewritten with different narratives, because all the bad, the violent narratives are not good and not didn't help Israel. Here we have more alternative, or the proliferation of critique and commentary on the other works. So satire, parodies, lots of humor here. And the Jews Are Coming is a program that now is controversial. Should they show it, because it's very critical. On the left, we say doing Bible. You can go to Michmanim. It's a village in the north, and they will host you in the village, like in the tent of Sarah and Abraham, and you can have honey when you leave. This is a jar of honey. So there is a clear celebration, ecstatic celebration of biblical life and money making, because Israelis are very interested in it and very thrive on this reality. The reality of citationality in biblical practices, as celebrated today, leads these artists to address the drowning of the individual reader in hyperreferentiality. They indeed engage in developing methods of reading with attention to semiotics and language of subjectivity and position to agency. Some have moved away from binarism and dichotomies to multiplicity and diversity, avoid making text and intertext into synonyms, and tell us that reading as if for utter identification has its limit. In doing so, they offer to declutter mind and body, to lift layer upon layer of signification in life of crowded with symbolism. In doing so, and engaging with these questions, we may be able to achieve a measure of emancipation and intellectual and emotional distance that will enable us to come back to the text as we wish, with new appreciation for reliable interpretive pathways. So here we have Ochel Meduyak, precise food. And I wanted to contrast it and intersect it against the mythological of milk and honey and the economy of drowning. Against the mythologies of milk and honey and their provisional aspiration, Eli Bachar, a brilliant Mizrahi poet, makes a new, Mizrahi is a Jew of Middle Eastern origin, or North African. He makes a new radical request. 40 days before his death, he asked for ochel meduyak, for exact, precise food. This demand for a new economy seeks to draw new ethical limits to language and its symbolic scape, a way to trim the excess, extraneous meaning of textuality and reverse the condition of tzatetet. Thank you.
So I'm assuming that I'll be able to see if there are questions, I would love to transmit them. No questions yet. Maybe I'll start something off. I don't want to take anybody's position. Please do submit questions.
It's in the Q&A box right below.
Oh, yay, that's a question. What's the meaning behind the sticker cow? I don't get why that stood out. The sticker cow, why did that win?
That's a good question. It's an internal internal humor of Israelis, because stickers became, at certain moment, they became a way to, again, to codify position. And then another writer, David Grossman, I think, wrote the Song of the Stickers that became very famous. and that just put different stickers expression together one after the other, and it became a song. So the sticker cow became again an archive of this kind of codes or expression. Yeah, I cannot take things for granted, right?
Can you tell us a little bit about the narrative of Hagar and Ishmael?
Yeah. Well, Hagar and Ishmael, the difficulty is how to explain the violence and how to understand the core of the conflict between Sarah and Hagar. I develop, looking at the narrative very closely, I focus on this idea of the impact of eyes and eye contact between Sarah and Hagar. Sarah, approach Hagar, she asked her to get pregnant so she can have a son for Abraham. And this was a very clear program, and it was very easily conceived. But once Hagar got pregnant and everything went fine, Hagar got pregnant, and then Sarah felt that she was belittled by Hagar's eyes, by the way she looked at her. And so there is something about the dialogue of eyes and what seeing mean in this interaction between the two women. And I developed the concept of the pregnancy gaze. So building on male gaze, what the pregnancy gaze does in the strict patriarchal society that is so, especially in the narrative, that scarcity of pregnancy is so sought after, and how the pregnancy gaze is actually a cultural place of disability of women, that by looking at a woman that was not pregnant by the pregnant woman, a non-pregnant woman, a woman who could not conceive, could really feel so belittled. So kind of a violent, almost violent act that Sarah felt as violent. And from there to develop how the relationship between them deteriorate to the point that she tortures her so much that she goes to the desert and she escapes, etc., etc. So seeing and how you are being seen, and in the context of patriarchy, and to think about this inability to conceive as disability, of self-disability, is really very powerful to understand, especially if you compare it and you bring the Handmaid's Tale into it, and you have some kind of a cultural horizon to see in contemporary culture the possibilities, the dystopian possibilities of such tragedy. I also feel like in looking at these narratives, it's really important to pay attention to sound and to the volume. And when we talk about, it's not just do you hear or not hear Ishmael, God hear her crying, but how do we hear her cry? What is the volume of her crying? Like, can we try to get into this space? Can we try to understand the volume of Sarah's laughter? What is, how to understand Sarah's laughter? Could we say that Sarah's laughter is another way of her presence? Like, almost like if we say, if we emphasize Abraham and say, Abraham is a depiction of Hineni as the most present and immediate and available to hear God. What do we do with his laughter? Can it be another aspect of presence of Sarah's Hineni? So I'm very interested in exaggerating the voice, or opening a space in which these maybe a muted space or the places that our culture didn't allow us to rave in this sound, because it's women and they are kind of easy to be excluded, how to bring them into the center and say, no, let's explore them. Let's bring sound and other seeing and other affect into the narratives and see what we learn from it and how we expand their possibilities.
Do you see the questions, Ruti?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm very thankful for this presentation. I'm very intrigued by your statement of Moses sending the spies as an ethnographic project. Can you revisit the slide where you discuss Khnaan as the land that eats its people and talk about its relevance for your scholarship? How did you arrive at that interpretation again?
Wow. Okay, thank you for the question. It's a wonderful question. Well, I think the idea that the land that feeds its people and nourish can turn into as a devouring land was very intriguing for me, and even to how to think about the contradiction. And going back to the ma'achelet, the slaughtering knife, is also from the root to eat. So yes, the knife eats on the meat, on the flesh, like Rashi is saying, but how to think about these roots together and account to the possible horror that they create. Let me bring these. You're talking about that, right? Okay. So how to think about the land and what another aspect of the land that eats its people is the total wiping of people, like in Korach and his people, when they speak against Moses and contest his leadership, the land opens. So this is not a metaphor. The land opens itself and take them all with the families, with their property all inside. So what kind of imagery is that, and how it is complete, especially when it's connected to a land flowing with milk and honey. So in Hebrew, it's not devouring, it's about eating. So this idea of eating is further, this contradiction through the root achal, to eat. But also, I took the slaughtering knife of Abraham, and I tried to see how the ma'achelet become actually the place of devouring, because in the narrative of Abraham and Isaac, there is a place in which Abraham and culture already alluded to the fact that Abraham is actually the victim of the sacrifice. It's not because he's the one who has to deal with God invocation and take his son. Other people say, no, it's Isaac, because Isaac is the one looking at history of wars and Holocaust. It's the children. So I could look at the literature, the incredible amount of poetry and other works that speak about the sacrifice of the son. And Yehuda Amichai said, no, it's not this, it's the animal itself, like Menashe Kadishman. Look at the sheep, look at the animal. And this is brings all, not only the human, but also the animal and the land together. In my thesis, I don't think it's only Abraham or Isaac or the animal. I think, or Sarah, as feminists say, that she was excluded and she's like the mother that was not part of the narrative. I think it's the reader who is the victim of this narrative, because the reader is implicated in the narrative in a way that it can never be separated from the text. There is a way in which the narrative forces a certain kind of identification for Israelis, and the Haggadah became so important that even if you're against it, or even if you refute it, you're still part of it in a way. So how to think about reading as a place that constitute that constitute different positions that don't allow you this possibility or the privilege of thinking otherwise, thinking from another perspective. I hope I answered the question.
You can follow up. We have another one here. What are some examples of the pre-statehood references to the land of milk and, oops, I skipped over one, I apologize. All right, I'll go with this one first and then I'll come back to them. What are some examples of the pre-statehood references to the land of milk and honey? Were they popular in the European diaspora as well?
Thank you for the question. This is a very nice, bring a very nice example of a fairy tale that Khnaan put actually in writing. So it became a text and now it is dramatized again and again. It's called Maaser Ez, the tale of the goat. It's about a Jew in the shtetl who was very poor, and they bought a goat, and every night the goat will disappear and then it will come with full udders of milk, and they were very happy. So one day the son said, "Dad, I'm going to follow the goat and see the miracle because something is happening." And so the child follows the goat and he goes to a miracle cave and comes to Tzfat. And in Tzfat, he realized the incredible land and abundance of everything, right? This is the utopic land. And he sent the goat back with a note in its ear to tell his father, "Please come with the goat at night, follow the goat like I did." So the goat arrives and the father is waiting for his son. He saw that the goat came by itself. He waited. Then he realized that maybe the kid was, met with bad people who harmed him, and he decided to slaughter the goat. And in the last minute, he noticed the note, and I forgot what it "Oy vavoy alalai," some kind of exclamation, how I missed my chance to go to the land of Israel. And this is like very early, late 19th, early 20th century tale that was so impactful that if you just use YouTube and look at Maaser Ez, the goat story, I mean, it's translated to, it's performed in Yiddish, it's performed in many other cultures, but in Israel there is fascination with it. So the most radical transformation that has done to the narrative is that girls perform it. So instead of a father and son, it's a grandmother, a daughter turn into a grandmother, and a girl standing with a goat. But the tale itself is very, the integrity of it is very much as it was. There's no real attempt to change it. But yeah, this is very important. And actually, and this is just an example, and Shlonsky built on this. This is the mythological landscape that he's trying to create. But the whole narratives of this time are very saturated with this idea that the landscape is the nourishment, and milk and honey is like the physical. Boaz Neumann is written about it, kind of the passion of the pioneers, how they had physical relationship with the land. They felt that the land it was sexual in the way that they felt the contact and the attachment to it. Rachel ben Tzvi, when they arrive to Israel, they take their sandals. They call biblical sandals, by the way, because of the way they are made with leather, and my colleague, my friend in Jerusalem, wrote about sandals, biblical sandals, but and take the wood stick like that we see on the stamp, and take their shoes off and walking to the village of Jeremiah in Anatot and pretending that they are in the biblical land. So there was a very clear sense that we pioneers and the Aliyot and the Jews came to the land of the past, and in that they turned the Bedouin into the people of the Bible. That's how they build there, because they look exotic and ancient. So that's, we can imagine how Israelite lived, seeing Bedouins and etc., etc. So there was a clear sense of how to allegorize and make the Bible much more tangible and much more immediate.
How did you become interested in this topic?
It's a good question. I think I started with, I'm very interested in how texts constitute us, what texts do to us, what language does to us, in the sense that how they not in terms of meaning, but how they mobilize it. And we can see how now in this reality, what language does and how it mobilized people in the case of January 6th, but also what language does and the space of personal and collective interpretation. I think we are very lucky that in this time, we women, feminists, biblical scholars can approach the Bible as if we were sages. That's what they did. We have the privilege of making and producing meaning and asking questions. So the whole tradition was very attractive to me, but also it's kind of inviting, and also I want to be critical because I can see the problems that come with it. And Karaite Jews in many ways were very interesting for me. This is the subject of my first book, in which I try to show the difference, or what does it mean to be, if Karaites define themselves. I did ethnography with them in the Bay Area of Egyptian Karaites, and I wanted to work on blood and menstruation. I wanted to see when they say that they are literal, their interpretation is literal, I wanted to see how they translate this literal meaning from the Leviticus to the body. What does it mean to follow menstrual blood practices in a literal way? And if you think that it sounds complicated, it was really complicated to do as ethnography and as a way to make my life more difficult. But I think I was very, I think I struggled with it, and I wanted to find something which was for that time good. But I think I continued to work with issues of interpretation and textuality, and what metaphors, I mean, space of metaphor and the space of interpretation afford us, and what it doesn't, how we are limited in our interpretive horizons when we are indoctrinated in a certain way, what question we are not allowed to ask, etc., etc.
We have one more question. I hadn't really thought before about how many biblical stories have binary themes in them. Your comment about opening space is really interesting. Do you think it's harder to do this without being a native Hebrew speaker?
No, I think all our culture is paved with binarism that destroy us. This is a very difficult, in many ways, we teach at the university, and one of the emphasis is how to undo or to unlearn certain kind of conventions that we internalize so deeply. If you read Genesis, even if you are Christian, if you are not Jewish, right? You read the Bible, there is a clear sense of us, them, how to bring from the beginning the way gender is reconstructed in Genesis. There's very clear sense that there is no non-binary space there. So this is what feminists do. So I wouldn't say you have to be Israelis or even to be feminist. It's really how to challenge binarism and certain kind of axioms, absolute truth, and how to deconstruct, how to challenge and think beyond what seems very available and very automatic to us.
Thank you so much, both for this fabulous talk and for the scintillating and really, evocative question.